And welcome back to episode 4 of the Commissioner's Office podcast. My name is Daniel, and I am joined by Jonathan Fogel and Nicholas Friedman. If you don't already know, they run a podcast called The Engine, which you can also find on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and WNTHradio.com. How's it going, boys?
We're doing good today. Nick, how are you doing?
I've been pretty good. I was antsy all day to do another podcast, so I'm glad to be on with Daniel.
Nick, I gotta say, because you were telling me about Daniel's podcast yesterday before I listened to it, and I just gotta say, Daniel, you have a 10 out of 10 podcast voice, like 100%, 100%, bro. Like, oh my god.
Describing Daniel, I remember. So I listened to like 5 minutes of one of your podcasts before you came on. And I was like, if you think about any person with just like that ideal, like soothing podcast voice,
It's butter on toast.
Literally him. Johnny, you have the radio voice, but he's got the podcast voice.
All right. Well, thank you. For our listeners, I also appeared on one of their episodes, their latest episode of The Engine. We talked about the top 10 head coaches in the NFL. So go check that one out. It is a very good episode. But the topic for today's episode is going to be, the 2008 New England Patriots. Now, a lot of our listeners might think, yeah, it was just another year with Brady, probably, 13-3 season, divisional round, first round bye. But it wasn't actually, because there was one big problem with that team, and that was that Tom Brady didn't actually play. He tore his ACL in the first game versus the Kansas City Chiefs. But somehow they still went 11-5. So I'm not exactly sure how that works, but we're going to try to dissect the team and see how it did work. So, as I already mentioned, starting quarterback was Matt Cassel. So, guys, what do you think of Matt Cassel? Was he a good quarterback when he played?
He was always a capable backup, I'd say. Describe him as.
That's what I would say. I mean, you look at the stats. He almost had 4,000 yards, 21 touchdowns, 11 picks. That's what I'm looking for from a backup, at least, from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could make the argument that Matt Cassel wasn't just a good backup, because he also he did not spend his entire career with the Patriots. He also played for the Chiefs as well and made a Pro Bowl with them in 2010. So this would have been after he left the New England Patriots. But basically what happens is Brady gets hurt in week 1 versus the Chiefs, and they send in Brody Croyle to throw like 3 passes. I looked at the box score before this episode, and then they pull him and they throw in Matt Cassel, and his first play is like a 50-yard pass play to Randy Moss. So it's pretty cool. But Matt Cassel actually ended up with 3,500 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions on the year. It's just that to me is insane. I don't know.
When he did get that starting job on other teams, he showed some flashes, but really was not ever really a top 20 quarterback in the league. So I think really a lot of this, of course, we're going to credit to Bill Belichick, the incredible coach, and passing it to Randy Moss and Wes Welker as their 2 top receivers. Most quarterbacks can succeed with the combination of coach and wide receiver. But does this hurt Brady is the question, his legacy?
Yeah,
in my opinion.
It's really interesting because this team went 11-5 somehow, but they didn't actually win their division. I think the Jets won their division because, they had the elite Mark Sanchez as their quarterback. But before we get to how they did, who was their leading rusher this year, the Patriots?
Sammy Morris.
Sammy Morris. Have you ever heard of Sammy Morris? I've never heard of him.
5th round pick for the Bills in the year 2000.
Yeah, so I mean, if there's anything the Patriots are good at, it's like pulling really this guy was literally born in Oxford, England. Like, how do they find these guys, man? Like, he didn't do anything stellar, but he also, 727 yards and 7 touchdowns is not going to, blow your socks off. But I don't know, just how does Belichick find these like trash running backs and turn them into like serviceable players? I don't know how he does that.
Daniel, I'm gonna present this argument to you, and it's one that me and Nick Friedman talk about very often, and it's that all running backs are trash, but put in the right circumstance, they can all be excellent. Here's the perfect example. Look at DeMarco Murray. You give him the best offensive line in the league, and he runs for almost 1,800 yards, maybe even above that. And he goes to the Eagles. He takes the paycheck, which is what I would do. That's what I would have done. Secure the bag, obviously. It's what you're supposed to do. And he's just underwhelming. And the argument can be made that the running back position, not antiquated, but it's not as important as that of a receiver. And I think that that's the problem with this Patriots team you're looking at in 2020 without Brady. Mm-hmm. You can succeed without having a great running back who runs for over 1,000 yards, but having great receivers, I'd say, and having a great coach with a mediocre quarterback is a decent way to have a good team.
That's interesting you say that, because you really think DeMarco Murray is trash? Like he's just like a trash player? Because I know
it's more of a joke, but you know what I mean.
I understand what you're saying, but also he did have another 1,200 yard season when he went to Tennessee.
Well, it's really not that running backs are trash. It's running backs aren't very valuable,
right?
Or very replaceable is probably the best word. Look at the Panthers right now; they look just as good of a team with Mike Davis instead of McCaffrey. And Mike Davis is putting up great fantasy numbers, but we all know they're not nearly the same level. So I would say it's really a replaceability argument, and that it is odd to me why the Patriots still invest so highly in running backs, like taking Sony Michel in the first round, Damian Harris in the third round, when there's usually such an analytically sound team who can pick up skill position players better than any team in the league off the streets.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the one thing that kind of struck me about this 2008 team is that it's kind of weird because Bill Belichick is this 65-year-old coach who's been coaching since the 70s, but yet he always has teams that are so ahead of its time. It's really weird because now I do understand what you're saying. I would say that, now in the last 20 years, running backs have become more replaceable. But when you look at, Sammy Morris, this guy comes out of nowhere, also replacing Kevin Falk, who's one of the veterans on that team. I guess he only started 3 games, but then they also had Lamont Jordan, who these are names that I think played before I was born.
Classic names.
Classic name. I think Lamont Jordan, this guy was he actually did rush for 1,000 yards once in 2005 in Oakland. But that's I don't know. It's really funny sometimes how Bill Belichick will just find the most random players and then just somehow get good production out of him. But here's a good name. This guy should belong in a Key and Peele sketch. Ben Jarvis Green Ellis.
Love him.
It's a good name. I vaguely remember that guy in 2010. He was kind of good, but I don't remember.
He was the Patriots bell cow for a little bit. This was the first year I played fantasy, and he was actually a pretty high pick. And then also, I remember he went to the Browns right before they took Trent Richardson, and a classic going from the Patriots to Browns move could not succeed at all.
Yeah, it happens.
So let's turn to their receiving game. Their best receiver was Wes Welker, who I believe, he made the Pro Bowl.
Randy Moss? What about
Randy Moss was their best receiver.
Randy Moss.
Well, maybe statistically career-wise, but that season Wes Welker had more receptions and yards.
But Randy Moss had 11 touchdowns and Wes Welker had 3.
I guess that's true.
And the argument, Daniel, could also be made that Randy Moss had 69 catches for 1,008 yards, and Wes Welker had 111 catches for 1,065 yards. I'd say that Randy Moss is probably the best receiver on the team.
Yeah, I think at that point he was. I think 2008 was probably, if 2007 was probably the peak of his career, this was probably the start of his decline because he was 31. But, still a good season nonetheless. It's just, it's very interesting because Randy Moss went from 2007, you got first team All-Pro, 1,400 yards on 98 receptions, 23 touchdowns, which I think is the record. And then you go to 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. He had a bounce back year the next year, but he did have Brady. But I guess that is a good argument. Randy Moss does more damage on less receptions, which and
Randy Moss is kind of such a big play threat that having a guy like Matt Cassel, who isn't going to air it out as much, doesn't have the job security to be chucking it up, or really the talent if we're going there to be throwing it 40 yards up to Randy Moss every single possession, which team should be doing because Randy Moss might be the most imposing receiver in NFL history. So I think that's definitely, if we're going purely based off Randy Moss, it's not really surprising that his stats went down that year.
Yeah, I mean, it's an overall lower quality quarterback, so it does make more sense. But yeah, it's it's kind of interesting because it kind of like reflects how the Patriots play currently. They have like kind of the same skeleton of their style of play. So like, their number one receiver now is Julian Edelman, who's kind of like Wes Welker, like a slot guy, transformed returner coming out of nowhere, and now he just only gets catches. I don't exactly know who the Randy Moss would be at this point. I guess it'd be like N'Keal Harry, but
I was gonna say N'Keal Harry's a dog.
That's
N'Keal
a steep comparison.
That's beyond steep. That's just they don't have that.
Yep.
I mean, Randy Moss is a top 3 receiver all time. Let's just be honest with ourselves. He's just an unbelievable talent. But N'Keal Harry is an underrated talent. His name is N'Keal. Like, come on now, Randy something. But N'Keal, I digress.
Yeah, I think other than Wes Welker and Randy Moss, man, they had like no receivers. They got Ben Watson, who was not a starter at that time, and man, Jabbar Gaffney was their third receiver. That's tough.
A name I've never heard in my life.
This is one of those names that like I would see when I played like Madden 12, and I'd be like, yeah, that guy's like really good. So I just would like spam him for no reason. The reality is, I guess he never had more than 900 yards in a season receiving. That was in 2011 when he was playing for Washington. But yeah, that team was just, it was a weak receiving core. But
this was the year before they took Edelman, so
yeah,
that would have made a big difference on that team.
Yeah, it's I think the previous season when they were 15-1, or not 15-1, 16-0, they had, I believe they had, what was his name, like Dante Stallworth, who was like supposed to be good, but then he like killed someone, and then they're like, oh well, he's in jail now. So I think
Casual.
Dante Stallworth killed someone.
No, I think, let me look it up. I know I'm not sure if he actually went to jail, but
I don't think he did, because I'm pretty sure he's pretty relevant right now.
He was suspended. I know that.
Okay.
For killing someone. Yes.
Yeah.
That is something you should.
3-game suspension.
Let's take a look here.
First degree murder.
He went to the arbitrary court. He got to move down to a
half. Let's take a look here. Personal life. Yeah. On the morning of March 14th, 2009, Stallworth struck and killed a pedestrian while driving his car at the eastern end of a place in Miami, Florida.
That's not good.
According to Wikipedia.
Did he go to jail?
I am trying to see. On April 9th, Stallworth was charged with DUI manslaughter. He surrendered to police on April 2nd, 2009, and was released on a $200,000 bail. Dang. He pulled an OJ.
Yeah, how can you get released for that?
That's just an oof. But
yeah. I will say, though. Sorry, you go.
Oh, yeah. I do remember that he was – the only reason I know that name is because I know that was like his only good season, I think, on the 2007 team. So, okay, he had like 697 yards. But still, that's, that's your third receiver right there out the window.
Was Deion Branch on that team yet?
I doubt it. He was not on 2007. 2008, I did not see his name.
Yeah, I haven't either. But it seems like he was kind of that era.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he was on the Seahawks then.
Yeah. Oh, I think what happened is he was an older player than I thought, because I think he was on those early like dynasty teams, and then he left and then came back towards the end of his career. I think that's what he did.
Tight end Ben Watson.
Yeah.
He was on the Patriots last year, and I don't think he's been good for really any of his career, which is he's been serviceable, but I think it's kind of funny to see a 40-year-old tight end who's on a team 12 years apart. He wasn't even young on this team.
Nick Friedman, you know how I feel about tight ends. They're kind of dumb.
Well,
so,
2015, Watson put up 74 catches, 825 yards. Not too bad.
Pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
A bit above serviceable.
He's a big like humanitarian guy. He's like always like the front runner for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. So, he's that's probably why he's still in the league. But yeah, I mean, on the offensive side, he's like this team just wasn't really that good. It's still surprising to me that they were, according to Football Reference, they had the 8th best offense in the league. I'm not sure how that's possible.
Pretty good offensive line.
Yeah, that's true. They did have a good offensive line.
Wide receiver wise, they might not have much depth, but this is one of the best, maybe not this season, but one of the best wide receiver duos in NFL history. Welker and Randy Moss. It's no matter who you have behind them, that's pretty lethal.
Yeah. And also this raises an interesting question. If, I always thought great quarterbacks are able to like take nobody wide receivers and turn them into like having good seasons. That was something I always thought Brady did really well. But is that just Brady or is that like a Belichick thing? So that's an interesting question because it seems like Matt Cassel was doing that not as well, but you never know.
Well, Daniel, I think you got to consider what you're asking here. So look, you give Carson Wentz absolutely nobodies to throw to. He's still making plays all over the field. The team is horrible. Like the team sucks. The team is no good. But I think that's not just a Brady thing. And I know this is more broad than what you were expecting, but I think that's not just a Brady thing. I mean, if you gave Case Keenum, specifically, I'm going to go Case Keenum with the Vikings, Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen to throw to, he's going to have a lot of success, as he did. If you give Matt Cassel a top 3 receiver all time and a really good, solid, white slot, fast guy, Wes Welker, then you're going to have a lot of success. And you give him the best coach of all time, I think you're going to have a lot of success. Yes, Matt Cassel was a lot better than the typical backup, and Matt Cassel did start for a decent amount of time. So I think it does depend on the person. But I think anybody capable around the Andy Dalton talent range would find similar success that Matt Cassel found.
Not sure what Wes Welker's whiteness has to do with that, but yeah, I mean that was always what I.
But you know the type I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Cole Beasley, Chris Hogan. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's always how I defined like when they talk about like the it factor that a lot of quarterbacks have, because I noticed that like Aaron Rodgers can do that pretty well. He like Alan Lazard, Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Nobody's ever heard of these guys, but somehow they're catching 80-yard touchdowns.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling says that he's the fastest person in the league. I'll take his word for it.
Really? Okay, well.
At the same time, though, Alan Lazard and Marcus Valdez-Scantling, I guess Lazard at glimpses, but it's not like they're good receivers.
Yeah.
And Rodgers really is not making them seem like great receivers. He's just making them seem like starters.
I guess,
which I guess is a bit of an elevation.
I would say that I think that's more of the definition that I was going for. This is interesting, though. In kicking and punting, so they still had Steven Gostkowski when he was the ripe age of 24. He made 36 out of 40 field goals, so that's pretty good. And then they had their punter was Chris Hansen, which is interesting because I always think of that like that weird show where they like catch predators and the guy was Chris Hansen. Know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you were talking about.
There you go. Yeah, that's a funny show sometimes. But also, Matt Cassel had one punt for 57 yards.
Yeah, that's a random stat. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Absolute cannon of a leg. That's insane.
I think Brady had a 50-yard punt once also. So
yeah,
maybe Belichick screams him.
Yeah, I remember the Patriots used to do that. It'd be like a 3rd down and 20, and Brady would just like take a shotgun snap and just punt it like 35 yards down the field.
Roethlisberger used to do that too a couple of times. I remember Ben Roethlisberger. They call it the pooch kick.
Yeah. Do any of you remember the Randall Cunningham, old Vikings quarterback?
I do.
Yeah.
The 90-yard punt he had.
Oh, I think I remember that. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
he had a 90-yard punt.
Yes, I remember.
I think he's
that.
the longest punt in NFL history was by a quarterback.
That's funny. Yeah.
Johnny Hecker made a case for being a top 5 punter all time on Monday. I'm not gonna lie to you.
That was just pain. That was just pure pain to watch me do that.
We should do
maybe if they didn't
analysis of our top 5.
Yeah, that's our next collab right there. In-depth analysis of the punters. But maybe if the Bears didn't have the walking fair catch known as Ted Ginn, they might actually have better field position. But I digress.
Hey. I really like Ted Ginn. I really like what he's doing for the Bears. Okay.
I wish he
you love his like 120-yard reception, don't you?
The thing is, he doesn't fair catch it. He just lets it bounce.
He fair catches it and then runs 10 yards forward of the ball, and then it just goes 10 yards back. It's just
all right, Daniel. Let me ask you a question. I know it's your show, but let me ask you a question. Do you think? Because I actually thought 3 weeks ago, I was under the impression that the 2-2 Patriots were a top 5 team in the NFL. What has happened since then, and why is their situation different than 2008? Besides the fact that they have receivers, because they have an MVP quarterback. Cam Newton won MVP. Yeah. I know he's a different man than he was, but why is this team different than the other one was?
Well, I mean, I think we can all agree that Matt Cassel is an MVP in all of our hearts anyway. But also, Cam Newton is, first of all, Cam Newton is recovering from COVID, so that might have an effect on how the team is. I haven't watched a ton of Patriots games because they're not as watchable as they were a few years ago. But I think, the one thing that I think Brady brought to the team that that they don't have anymore, that a lot of people kind of, gloss over, is like the intensity that Brady has. Every single time he would accidentally throw an in route on an out route to Chris Hogan or whatever, he'd like throw his helmet on the ground and, start screaming or whatever, which is, I think, something that the Patriots kind of need. Cam Newton is kind of like a weird personality, but he's not like, he's not going to yell at his teammates. Like, he's going to just kind of like, wear his crazy hats to the press conferences and just like, do his thing. I think the Patriots are kind of lacking like that. Well, they're lacking like an X factor on offense, definitely. Their offense is missing something. But they're also lacking that intensity because, Bill Belichick brings about as much intensity as like a cat. So, I don't know. That's why I don't think they're that good. But if you look on the defensive side for this 2008 Patriots team, you see that Gerard Mayo led the team in tackles at the age of 22. I kind of remember this guy, but I also remember that he kind of had like a shorter career, didn't he?
He had a decent career. He retired 5 years ago, I think. I do remember vividly him in, I think it was Takeo Spikes.
Spikes, yeah, that's a name.
Spikes, and they were always injured. Very good when they played, but I remember at least towards the end of their careers, both those guys played very limited time.
Yeah, well, your memory is pretty good because Gerard Mayo played about 7 seasons, and then for the last 3, he did not start more than 8 games. So yeah, that definitely makes sense. But yeah, Gerard Mayo, I remember that he was really good when he played, but when he didn't, the whole team kind of fell. They also had Brandon Merriweather. I think he played for the Bears for a little bit. That's interesting. And then still had Teddy Bruschi, and then Vince Wilfork. Completely forgot about Vince Wilfork.
I will never forget about him.
The only time I see him now is on that DraftKings commercial where the guy is like, "Hey Vince, can you help me draft my team?" And he's just eating all of his food or something like that. I don't know. It's kind of funny. He's turned himself into the Peyton Manning of defensive tackles now.
The Peyton Manning, what does Peyton Manning do? All-State
Papa John's, or is it Nationwide? Nationwide. Papa John's.
Nationwide, yeah, no. Vince Wilfork is the Peyton Manning of Nationwide of sports gambling of defensive tackles. It's a long title.
Yeah. They also had Richard Seymour. I forgot about this guy. He was really good. He was really good. Yeah, 7-time Pro Bowler. All 2000s team. But I think at that point, he still had 2 Pro Bowl seasons before he retired after 2008. But,
defense of front is the most dominant probably in Patriots of this dynasty. Because right now, at least in the recent years, they've been very secondary focused. Mm-hmm. But right here, this run stopping defense is probably on the historic side.
Yeah, they got I think he had 8 sacks that year. I'm not sure if that led the team, but let's see. Did that lead the team? Yeah, it did. So he led them in sacks. The second one was a guy named Adalius Thomas. I've never heard of that guy. He only had 5. What? Oh, he actually made the Pro Bowl twice. Okay, well, that's interesting. He was born in a town called Equality, Alabama. That's
you just love the random facts, don't you?
Yeah, that's kind of an oxymoron.
I've heard of that place because it's an oxymoron. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of funny just to look at these old teams and see some of these random players that just kind of popped off, and you're just like, huh, forgot that guy existed, But yeah, so this team finished 11-5. They're second in the division. Um, I'm looking at like the box scores of each of their games right now. They started off like 5-2, and then they finished 11-5. So this team is pretty solid all the way around. I think the thing that's sticking out is they don't seem to be allowing a ton of points. You know, there are a few anomalies here and there, but like overall, the defense was pretty solid. What do you guys think?
Yeah, this defense is one of the best front sevens I've ever seen on paper. Just gonna say that. Secondary wise, though, it's not really a usual Belichick secondary.
Yeah.
Brandon Merriweather was a star, but these other guys, Ellis Hobbs, Delpha O'Neal, and James Sanders were the other starters. To be honest, I've heard of none of those three.
Delpha O'Neal, that's a name.
Yeah, that is a name.
But they still did have Matthew Slater. Matthew Slater is an absolute tank.
He was in the league then?
Yeah. That
Oh my
was
goodness, I
his.
did not know he was that old.
That might have been his rookie. Yeah, that was his rookie year.
Wow.
Wait,
They lost Asante Samuel the year before, which definitely.
That's tough.
That's
Asante
tough.
Samuel Jr. currently at Florida State, though.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah,
He's pretty good.
I didn't realize. Oh, actually, well, first thing I was gonna say is the Patriots would have won that Super Bowl the year before versus the Giants. I think if Asante Samuel didn't drop that interception at the end of the game, I think. If you look it up, there's a play at the end where he had an interception on the
I know
sideline.
you're talking about, but
Yeah.
I think the hypothetical, because if we're just going off hypotheticals, if Brett Favre doesn't throw the interception in the NFC Championship game in overtime, I think the Packers probably beat the Patriots in that Super Bowl to begin with. So I really don't think that I don't really think that matters. We're just talking about hypothetical.
You could go hypothetical with anything, like if David Tyree drops that pass.
I just like talking about Packers football, Nick Friedman.
Okay.
But something I didn't realize, Matthew Slater's dad is Jackie Slater, who I recognize that name. He was a 7-time Pro Bowler and a Hall of Fame, looks like tackle and guard for the Rams in the 70s and 80s. So that's pretty interesting. But yeah, this conversation has just gone like so far off. But yeah, it seems like one of those classic Belichick teams where like you don't really know why they're winning. You don't really know why they're good, but they just kind of are. It's kind of like the last few years with the Patriots,
Yeah, and I would say bringing it back to this year, one of the reasons people are losing faith in the Patriots pretty much on a daily basis after seeing Cam Newton play the last 2 weeks is people aren't giving Belichick enough credit from at the beginning of the season. He's completely switched an offensive scheme. He's not even necessarily an offensive coach, but him and McDaniels completely switched it. Brady and Cam Newton could not really be more different as quarterbacks in the NFL. Yeah. And it looked really successful, but also when you're so new to something, the room for error is a lot less. You don't really know what you're getting rid of or what you're losing and all that. And having Cam Newton get COVID, which he is actually seems like he's affected by it because missing that 1 week of NFL action. And then now he's been a way worse quarterback than he was at the start of the year. Is really kind of making the scheme a little bit useless. And the Patriots have not had to deal with this before because they've never had a Cam Newton-like quarterback. So it's just really they are still figuring out ways to fix it because it's so new to them.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. It's just kind of funny when you're watching a Patriots game. You don't expect the quarterback to be doing like design QB runs up the middle. But yeah, I was looking at some of their coaching staff from 2008. They had a lot of notable assistants. So Brian Flores, who's now the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, was their special teams assistant. He would later be the linebackers coach, I believe. They also had Bill O'Brien, who was the wide receivers coach. I think he would later go on to coach Penn State, I believe.
Ooh, that's a tough coaching job.
Yeah, especially I think he also had to coach there like right after that like scandal broke with Jerry Sandusky. So that's kind of a tough job. And then, as you know, he just kind of bumbled around the Texans and, got himself fired. They also had Matt Patricia, who was the linebackers coach, and later would be the defensive coordinator. So that's before all their assistants left.
Was McDaniels the Broncos coach that year?
No, he was the offensive coordinator. I was looking at that before. He was it's really funny. He was the offensive coordinator from New England from 2006 to 2008. Denver's head coach for 2 years, and then he was St. Louis's offensive coordinator in 2011, and then he went back to New England, and he's stayed there ever since. So that's pretty interesting.
He is the reason Jay Cutler was not a good Bears player. I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna make McDaniels, or get mad at McDaniels for that.
Josh McDaniels is statistically the best quarterback in Bears history. What else do you want?
Wait,
Who?
what? Josh McDaniels?
Jay Cutler, you mean?
No, Jay Cutler. My bad. Jay
Yeah,
Cutler
yeah.
is.
Well, I wanted him to be like a great quarterback. I mean, he was pretty good, better than anyone we've had since him. But
Yeah, he had a few good years. He just threw a lot of interceptions, and it was like
He wasn't very good against the division, which I think is important to note.
Yeah, they should have made the playoffs in what was it, 2012, I believe. That was
They start out 7-1. They end up not making the playoffs, which is pretty impressive if you ask me.
Yeah, I just
what was the year of the
Randall Cobb?
Chris Conte? Yeah,
I think that was 2014. Was that 14 or 12? I can't remember.
14, the Packers went to the NFC Championship game against the Seahawks and lost. 15, they played the Cardinals in the divisional round and lost. I think it was 13.
Okay,
Maybe.
yeah.
Because it was Shea McClellan who caused the injury, one of my least favorite players of all time.
and I still have not gotten over
Oh God.
Chris Conte?
the fumble.
Oh, I remember
They didn't
that.
call
Yeah.
it, yeah.
Or I think
And no one picked it up. No one picked it up.
Oh, Jared Boykin, classic,
Yep.
classic, absolute classic play.
That was tough. I remember watching that, and I'm just like, come on, man. Like, why are you blitzing on 4th down and
I mean, if
8?
it makes you feel any better, we lost in the first round of the playoffs to the 49ers. 49ers ended up going to the Super Bowl and losing.
Oh, that was the year they got bounced by Kaepernick.
No,
wasn't
the
that?
49ers lost to the Seahawks in the NFC Championship game. That was the first championship that the Seahawks won.
No, I was saying that was
was-
the year the
yeah, yeah.
Packers got bounced by Kaepernick. Yeah.
Yeah, then that 81-yard
Yeah.
run.
I remember. I think I
No.
was watching-
That was different. That was the year before. That was 2012 when the 49ers lost to the Ravens in the Super Bowl. But in 2013, Aaron Rodgers broke his collarbone, lost to Colin Kaepernick as a 5th seed, and then it was the year where I believe what's his name, Richard Sherman with Michael Crabtree with the Aaron Andrews interview, and he's like,
Yeah.
"When you put me with a star receiver like Crabtree, that's the result you're gonna get." You know what I mean?
I thought
That's,
that was the same year. They made the Super Bowl.
No, because Kaepernick made the Super Bowl the first year that he took over, and then the second year was the Sherman interception. I do know that.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh my God! I was thinking Sherman was on the 49ers.
Yeah.
I've
that was
completely blanked those two teams out right now.
Yeah, that was a funny era. They had it was just, I don't know, it's just kind of interesting, like the 2008 through like 2012 seasons, like there was so much parity in those that 5-year time span. It was just like it was more refreshing than it is now. They still had Manning in the AFC. They still had the elite Joe Flacco. Mark Sanchez was doing some damage where he could, but it's an interesting era on that.
I do think we're about to get that though.
Yeah.
It looks like there's a new quarterback wave that's about to finally settle.
Yeah.
oh my God, Nick.
I hope it's not. I hope it's not dominated by Mahomes. I really feel like. I hope it's not just the AFC is the same 3 teams, next 10 years. But, hopefully, American dream.
Daniel, listen to these quarterbacks. Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Patrick Mahomes, Trey Lance, Carson Wentz, Lamar Jackson,
Deshaun Watson.
Jared Goff, Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, Jordan Love.
Nope. Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Tua, Deshaun
Unreal.
Watson.
Like, literally unreal. Unreal.
Nick Foles. I mean,
Yeah, Mitch Trubisky, watch out, taking over the league.
Graham Mertz in a couple of years. Next Patrick Mahomes. Joe Milton.
I'll take it.
Yeah, I haven't watched a ton of college football this year. I don't know. Since the Big Ten wasn't playing for a while, it was just like, whatever. What am I going to do? Watch Alabama beat up this Division III team that's just happy to get a nationally televised game? Like, nah, I got better things to do.
What are you talking about? They're only playing conference games.
Oh, they are? Oh.
No, Bama played some trash team.
Yeah. I think I heard that was like a thing. Like a Division II team pays the other team to get them on a nationally televised game just for the TV because they know they're going to lose by 9 touchdowns.
Well, so that's usually true, but week 11 every year, the SEC actually Alabama, and Auburn, maybe Georgia, but those teams for sure will pay like the Citadel or Southern Alabama or someone horrible. And they actually pay the team because they want that easy win going into it before rivalry week 12.
Yeah.
In their big games. So maybe it's week 12, then week 13 because of buys, but that's when the SEC will pay.
Oh, I do got a question since you guys know a good amount about college football. This conversation has just gone all over the place, but what do you guys think of the college football playoff? Do you think it's a better system than like the FBS system, or do you think it should be expanded?
I would like to see 6 teams, to be totally honest. I think there needs to be some leeway where a non-Power 5 team has a chance at making it.
Yeah.
And they're also going to have to stop putting Oklahoma and Notre Dame. If they keep it at 4 teams, Oklahoma and Notre Dame are going to keep making it every year and lose in the first round every year, or just going to be completely banned from the college football playoff because they lose every single year they're in it for kind of an unfair reason.
Nick, it has to be 4. And you know it has to be 4. Nick, who are the best 3 programs in the country consistently every year based on recruiting classes?
So Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, probably, right?
Yeah, Alabama, Clemson, the team down south.
Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State.
Yeah.
And then it's Georgia, but I'd say these are all together. Obviously, the podcast listeners can't see my hand because we're recording with our faces right now. But Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama are in a league of their own. And it's really not even close. Like, it really isn't even close. I mean, I know Georgia sometimes gets the best recruiting class, but Kirby Smart is not Nick Saban. I don't like Dabo Swinney, but he's a really good college football coach. And who's the coach of Ohio State? Ryan Day. Ryan Day has been groomed by the second best college football coach probably ever. Urban Meyer's.
Ever?
Up there. He's up there. Urban Meyer's
okay.
unreal.
Not ever.
Urban Meyer's unreal.
Probably not ever.
Anyways, listen. It has to be 4 because every time the ones he plays the 4 seed, besides the exception with Ohio State in the first year, it's not even close. I want to see Alabama play Clemson. I want to see Ohio State play Alabama, whatever. I barely care about Georgia because when Georgia plays Alabama, they just get smoked. Georgia can't win big games. Oklahoma can't win big games. And Notre Dame sucks. They don't get good quarterbacks. It's nothing.
So why should not be a 3-team playoff then?
I actually wouldn't be opposed to that. I actually wouldn't be opposed to that. The one seed gets bye.
How would that work? Bye.
Would you have a problem with that? Because I have absolutely no problem with that.
I think it should be like a 10-team playoff, personally.
No, because it's so pointless. It's so top heavy.
But think about like 2 years ago, that was like UCF or something. They went like undefeated like 2 years in a row, and they didn't even have a shot at the college football playoff.
Daniel, let me explain something to you. Every single year, Alabama has a top 3 recruiting class. Every year, Ohio State. Every year, Clemson. Okay, there are 25-star recruits in the ACC. How many do you think Clemson has?
20.
15.
18.
There
are 20 5-star recruits. Nick Friedman, you already know the answer to this question. There are 20 5-star recruits in the Big Ten. How many are in Ohio State?
18.
14. It's not fair. It's really not fair. And honestly, it's not even close. If you want to argue, I will keep 4. I'm fine with 4 because 4 is fine because I can rely on whoever the number 1 is. Obviously going to be Clemson this year because the thing about Clemson is, Nick, you've watched Trevor Lawrence play. He's bored. He can't wait to play Notre Dame. He wants to play everybody because he's bored. He's an NFL quarterback, and to even think that there's anybody who's going to beat them this year is almost laughable unless you're talking about Ohio State or Alabama because nobody's going to beat them.
Clemson is different than Ohio State and Alabama, though. Clemson in the ACC is not losing, but
I know.
Ohio State and Alabama can play in close games.
But you've got NFL quarterbacks, and you've got on Alabama, Nick, how many first-round picks on the top of your head do you think Alabama has?
I'll do it. I'll do it out loud on this roster. All right. Mac Jones, probably not. Najee Harris shouldn't be because running back should never go in the first round. Jalen Waddle, assuming.
Yeah.
Devontae Smith, maybe. Alex Leatherwood at tackle. Then defensively, Dylan Moses, Christian Barmore, Patrick Surtain. And let's see. Is there anyone else? John Mechie, maybe another really good receiver. Bryce Young, their backup quarterback, will probably be a first-round pick at some point. Their center, who's slipping their name, will be a first-round pick at some point. So, yeah, Alabama's got it.
Same with Ohio State. Same with Clemson. these are the words that I've seen in every article. They're NFL factories. It's not close. It has to be 4 teams. I wouldn't be opposed to 3. I'm fine with 4, but the 1 seed always just routes the 4 seed. It's over. It has
to me, that's, in my opinion, I think that's why we need a larger playoff, just so there's the possibility of an upset. Because in a 4-team playoff, it's just like if it's Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, and then some, occasionally you get a Washington or you get a Georgia or an Oregon or whatever, it's just automatically a loss. I don't understand why that's a good thing for college football. It's just pointless to watch. At this point, the standalone bowl games are much more fun than the actual playoff itself because they're much more evenly matched. I don't know everything about college football, but in my opinion, I'd like to see a larger playoff.
I think if they expand it to be bigger than 6 games, what I said, maybe 4 games, even if they expand it bigger than 4 games, bowl games just won't really matter.
Yeah.
They barely do now. They barely do now. I mean,
oh yeah, they're just marketing.
I've heard people say to me, specifically over the weekend, a friend of mine I was talking to him, he said college football is better than the NFL. And I said, why? And he said, if you take fantasy out of the NFL, then you wouldn't watch it. And I was like, okay, but you have to take it as it is. And then he pushed me to this point. Bowl season is better than the NFL playoffs. And that is actually the most ridiculous thing I may have ever heard from anybody. The bowl season outside of the 6 games is the biggest cash grab in sports. Yeah, it is the biggest cash grab.
It's product placement. That's just all it is. I remember, I'm going to sound like such a boomer when I say this, but I remember 5 years ago, it was just, the Orange Bowl and the Rose Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl. Now it's the PlayStation, Fiesta Bowl and the whatever, Papa John's Orange Bowl or whatever.
The GoDaddy Gator Bowl.
Yeah.
They've always had sponsors, but now they've added them to the name.
It's just product placement at this point.
And really, this year especially, every single team is bowl eligible, which doesn't make bowls impressive at all. So this year,
exactly,
when it's 6 wins, bowls mean very little. If they made bowls 8 wins or something, bowl season compete with NFL playoffs.
Yeah, I mean,
until we get to that point, the NFL playoffs, outside of March Madness, which is also unreal cash grab. Don't get me wrong, but it's entertaining. It's way more. Nick Friedman, what are you more likely to do? Sit down on winter break and just watch a bunch of bowl games, or are you on spring break? You're going to sit down and watch a bunch of March Madness games.
Both probably. I mean, I like March Madness more than bowl games, if that's what you're asking me. And I guess I like winter break more than spring break, which I think is another very important question.
That's fair.
The thing about that argument that the bowl season is better than NFL playoffs, the NFL playoffs and March Madness has something that college football doesn't. It has parity. College football is I don't know. The frustrating thing to me about watching college football is first of all, if you're not a fan of one of 5 teams, your team has no chance to do anything. Second of all, a college team could literally go undefeated and still not even make the college football playoff. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Paradox.
Yeah, it's just I personally, I think it should be expanded, but Jameis Winston's not in college anymore, so I don't watch that much college football. So I don't know. It's an interesting philosophical question in the world of sports. Mm-hmm. But what were we talking about again? Oh yeah, the 2008 Patriots. We might as well close out the episode with how did this team do? So as I said before, they went 11-5. And in the playoffs, so the Patriots, they didn't make the playoffs. That's interesting. You know why? Because the Titans went 13-3, got the 1 seed. Steelers won their division. The Dolphins won their division. Okay, I was wrong. Jets didn't win. It was the Dolphins. I guess that was before the Sanchez just, I don't know.
That was Curtis Martin.
Took the league by storm, the Sanchez.
Yeah. Colts got the 5 seed. Chargers got the 4 seed. And then Baltimore took the 6 seed. What were you going to say?
Who was on the Dolphins?
You know what I think? I think, was this the Wildcat offense year where they just only ran Wildcat? I think it was.
I don't know who is on this.
Because, their starting quarterback was Chad Pennington. Actually, it wasn't that bad, but for a small sample size.
Drafted over Brady.
Yeah. Yeah, well, so was Giovanni Carmuzzi or whatever that guy's name was. So,
is he the goat farmer?
So is DeMarcus Ware.
Or the goat yoga guy?
Yeah, it's he's the farmer guy. Giovanni Carmezzi, that's his name. I forgot his.
Yeah, no, he does. His thing is he does goat yoga.
Yeah, he's not even
how he's become famous.
Yeah, But yeah, so the Dolphins, they had Ronnie Brown, who had 916 yards and 10 touchdowns and a Pro Bowl. They also had, the last of whatever Ricky Williams was at that point. And then they had my boy Ted Ginn as their returner. So that's also Joey Porter, 17 and a half sacks. That helps.
Was Jason Taylor?
I believe this was probably after because he's not on this list. But
Cameron Wake?
Cameron Wake was probably playing
He was,
in
I think,
the
a little
CFL
after.
at this point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Their coach was Tony Sperano. That's interesting. Never
Heard that name
of that guy.
before. Where's he at? Wherever he's at.
He's probably like a coordinator somewhere. But yeah, I think this was the Wildcat year because they beat New England 38-13 in week 3. That's insane. So eventually in 2008, the Patriots, I believe they let Matt Cassel go, and I think he went to the Chiefs after that. And is he still in the league? I don't know. Is he on a team?
Matt Cassel? I thought who was playing? Was it Matt Moore who replaced Patrick Mahomes last year when he was out for like a game?
Yeah, Matt Schaub is on the Falcons right now, but Matt Castle's done. I remember he was on the Lions a couple of years ago.
Unfortunately, he's out of the league. He played for the Lions in 2018, so that's unfortunate. But yeah, so the Super Bowl champion this year was the Steelers. I believe this is the year that they beat the Cardinals on the San Antonio Holmes catch. So yeah, that is the wild world of 2008 when the economy crashed and the Steelers won the Super Bowl. So there you go.
So you're saying because the economy crashed this year, the Steelers are also going to win the Super Bowl?
Well, I guess so.
Not as bad, but
I guess we're going to end off
Nick
on
Friedman, are we ready to draw that conclusion?
I'm still hoping for the Bears.
I'm holding out hope.
You can keep hoping.
Hey, man, I mean, Rodgers is going to get bounced in the championship anyway, so, that's what he does.
Yeah, but, I've heard, I've had a lot of arguments with a lot of people. I've had an argument with a Browns fan who said, well, Rodgers is just going to get bounced in the championship. And I was like, well, got to make the playoffs if you want to make an argument with me. So,
yeah,
cool.
Browns haven't made the playoffs in either me or my older brother's lifetime, I believe. They last made the playoffs in 2002. So that's pretty tough. But yeah, so
that's beyond me and Freeman's time as well.
Yeah, so I guess that's the conspiracy theory that we're gonna close out the episode with, since whenever the economy crashes, the Steelers will win the Super Bowl. So we are on record.
Did they win in 1915? Or whatever.
20.
They might have.
In the 20s?
Maybe the 20s?
No,
the old 20s?
Yeah, 1929. Were they even around when the Great Depression hit?
Was I 14 years off? Oh God.
Oof, that's tough.
Well, we don't talk about that. We should
do an episode about that.
Football conspiracy
biggest conspiracy theories. Yeah, that should be our next episode.
Yeah, why not?
That is going to conclude episode 4 of the Commissioner's Office podcast. If you enjoyed hearing me specifically speak, you can check out the Commissioner's Office on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and WNTHradio.com. Also, John and Nicholas have a podcast called The Engine, which you can find on the same platforms. They got great content, and they got me on their latest episode. So, feel free to check that out. Yeah. Feel free to check that one out. It's a really good episode. So for now, I will see you all next time.